It's Anthony Chadwick welcoming you to another episode of VETchat from the Webinar Vet. Really pleased to have Natalie Arrow on the line today. I've got to just test myself saying that because, of course, many of you who've listened or watched Natalie's webinars will know her as Natalie Waddington. Obviously, Natalie, lots of really nice things about getting married, but one of the pains for women is having to change the name, which can take a bit of time, can't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, bit of a pain.
I remember when I got married to my wife, she had to confuse the kids in her junior school by suddenly changing her name sort of between terms. So she was McNamara, which is, of course, son of the sea, before she went off on half term. And then she was Chadwick when she came back, which was
So
terribly confusing. But, of course, as a son of the sea, she probably would be very interested to listen to this podcast because we're going to be talking all things cetaceans. And obviously, as a veterinary surgeon who's doing so much work with cetaceans as part of the British Divers Marine Life Rescue, it'd be great to know about some of the really cool things you're doing. But perhaps before we get into that, tell us a little bit about the history. What brought you to working with dolphins and whales and porpoises at this stage in your life?
Well, to be honest, this was definitely not the plan. I think I've always had a background interest in wildlife and growing up as well. It was always something that I kind of wanted to do. But as I went through vet school, I was really put off by how competitive it looked to get into this sort of zoo and wildlife field. So I decided that I was going to try and embark on becoming a small animal medicine specialist. So that was kind of the aim when I left vet school. And then the first practice that I worked at in Cornwall was very strangely enough somewhere that had a small seal pup hospital being run out of the back of it by British Divers Marine Life Rescue. And on my well, it was only my first few weeks, one of the nurses at the practice asked me if I liked seals. And I was like, sure, yeah, why not, sort of thing. And she said, well, out the back in the outbuildings, there is this small facility being run by this charity, and they're always looking for veterinary help. So if you want to go and get involved as a volunteer, then you could. So I was massively excited by this and went straight out there at the next lunch break to ask, can I get involved? And they were really keen to have me there. The rest is history, really. I've just got more and more involved with the charity over time, mostly working with seal pups, but also attending a fair share of cetacean strandings as well, and doing a lot of support remotely for cetacean strandings happening all over the UK, and doing a lot of teaching on the subject as well. So yeah, it kind of all grew just from that first moment at that practice and having that opportunity to go and get involved. And no, I am not a small animal medicine specialist.
And of course, Devonian born and bred, but now moved over to the dark side and lived in Cornwall. How does that feel?
It can be difficult sometimes. There are some barriers that have to be worked through, but luckily I still do my cream tea the right way around for my Devonian heritage. So I'm still loved when I go back home.
And I must admit, I went to Cornwall when I was still in sixth form. We did walked around the coast, and the people there are very friendly. And was down there again recently, a year or two ago. Nikki Paul has a cottage down there which we bid on for a vet life auction, and then because of the COVID crisis, everybody was wanting to keep their holidays at home, so everybody sort of descended on Devon and Cornwall, I think, didn't they, a couple of years ago? So it probably got quite busy. But we were by Lostwithiel, went to the Eden Project and so on, but unluckily didn't see any porpoises or any dolphins.
Yeah, that's the way of it. Unfortunately, it's kind of what makes it extra magical to me, is that when you're going out, you're never guaranteed to see anything at all. So if you do see something, then it's very special.
Well, I think that's the beauty of being a naturalist. Obviously, I think we both share that sort of love of animals, wild and tame. And of course, we're recording this today on World Animal Day, which is partly celebrated because it's also the feast of Saint Francis of Assisi, who's the patron saint of animals and the environment. So it is it's good that we're doing this today. And only yesterday I was traveling back from WSAVA from Lisbon to Faro, and I was on the train and I saw about 10 flamingos off from the train and about 100 storks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, you're right. It is that magical moment of, if you go out kind of wanting to tick off things, sometimes you lose the magic of just being in nature, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. No, you've got to be in the moment and just enjoy whatever you see on the day.
And sometimes it's the ordinary things. When I was traveling over to the ISFM conference on the ferry, it was just seeing the Manx shearwaters flying in front of the boat and the occasional gannet.
Mm-hmm.
It's those things that can bring real joy, can't they?
Yeah,
It
yeah,
must be a very
absolutely.
joyful job to do, but then upsetting when you see pups that are unwell, or indeed some stranded cetaceans, because I suppose once they are stranded, it's usually a sign that there's something more seriously wrong. They tend to strand when they're unwell, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, certainly a big proportion of them will strand because they are unhealthy in some way. They might be a very old animal that's just coming to the
Mm.
end of its natural life, or it may be that it has a nasty infection of some sort or an injury. But we do also see cetaceans strand in a healthy state, as far as we can tell when we go and do the assessments on the beach. And so, in those circumstances, then we'll try and get a vet on site to actually double check that they are healthy. And if they
Yeah,
are, then we will attempt to refloat them. So, in a controlled way, we will try and get them swimming again, basically. And when that goes well, it is just amazing. It's just one of
yeah.
the some of the best experiences I've ever had been refloating cetaceans. Yeah, it's very, very rewarding when all goes to plan.
What sort of percentage do you feel that you can rescue from a stranding? Of those that you go to see, is it 10%? Is it 20%? Is it higher than that?
Um, it's it's difficult to say, um, purely because we are dealing with such a wide variety of different sort of circumstances and
Yeah,
situations. Um, Recently, I went to a mass stranding of common dolphins in a river in Cornwall. So we had 8 individuals. Um, and strangely enough, when they mass strand, it's actually more likely that they've stranded because of something to do with the sort of the local terrain. So they've basically made like a
yeah,
navigational error. Sorry. So they've come into the river at high tide looking for fish, and then been caught out as the tides receded. And if we can get people and resources to those sorts of situations, we can sometimes refloat all of those animals, and the success rate can be high. So on that day, we did manage to save 7 out of the 8 animals, which is amazing.
yeah,
But when we see single animals strand on their own, I'm a lot more suspicious that they are unwell. And then when we're going to those
yeah.
lone animals, I would say sort of maybe 70 to 80% of the time, we're probably looking at a euthanasia. But it really varies for so many different reasons.
Hmm. And when you're working with the dolphins, particularly that mass stranding, do they kind of understand you're trying to help them, or can you still be given a nasty bite or anything?
Um, they, I always struggle to explain what it's like working with stranded cetaceans because it's very unusual. Um, Part of my dissertation for my master's was looking at these interactions that happen between people and dolphins at strandings, and speaking to a lot of my colleagues who have been in these situations. And they all kind of describe this kind of otherworldly experience of dealing with this animal that, is an animal and is very, very different to us, clearly. But at the same time, we know that they have this really advanced capacity for high emotional intelligence, extremely social, very, very close social bonds, things like that. And it's very odd just to deal with this creature that's so not like us, but also so like us at the same time. And you can make eye contact with them. And sometimes you just get this impression that there really is somebody home looking back at you, and kind of, reacting to what you were doing. And I've definitely had circumstances where we as a team have been helping a dolphin and getting them more comfortable and things on the site where they're stranded. And they will respond positively to our first aid. So their behavior will become a lot more relaxed. Their respiratory rate will come down, which suggests, again, that they're becoming more relaxed. And that's quite unusual. Most wildlife, as you know, once humans are interacting with it, they are
Yeah.
extremely stressed, very unhappy, could die from the interaction. But it doesn't seem to always be that way with cetaceans. So yeah, they are quite unusual and very, very fascinating to work with.
And I think you see a real sense of the joy, which you can see in many animals. But that I remember going to see Fungi in Dingle. He was a famous dolphin there that used to inhabit the bay in Dingle, and
Mm.
he would jump at the side of the boat. Now, I'm sure there are some other reasons, but there almost seemed to be a joy in being
Hmm.
close to people as well. And you don't want to anthropomorphize animals, but at the same time, I really understand what you're saying. There's a close connection. They are such
Mm.
an intelligent group, whales, dolphins, and porpoises.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think the more people I've spoken to who have had these sorts of interactions with cetaceans, both out cetacean watching with healthy, happy animals, and those that are stranded, and people do use a lot of quite complicated emotional terms to describe how they think the dolphin was feeling, and it's amazing that they've managed to get that just from a short amount of time spent, seeing or with the animal. So yeah, it's something that I find really, really interesting is that sort of connection that we
Mm.
have with cetaceans.
And of course, you hear about people being protected by dolphins from sharks and the like, don't you, as well, in
Mm-hmm.
certain instances. So yeah, it's a fascinating, and it must be such a privileged place to be in, to be working so closely with all of these creatures.
Yeah, it's a huge, huge honor. It's something that I never ever expected to do. So yeah, I feel massively privileged to be able to assist them.
So Natalie, where did you graduate from veterinary wise?
So I graduated from the Royal Veterinary College in 2016.
Right. And then you've done your masters. Where did you do your masters?
That was with the University of Edinburgh, but online,
Oh,
thankfully. The commute
oh,
would have
right. And
been
what was the
awful.
masters topic? What were you studying
Uh,
particularly?
Conservation medicine.
Ah, brilliant. Good. And you've obviously done quite a few webinars for us as well, as I said before, under the name Waddington for those wanting to have a look at them. Seal puppet health assessments, treatment of seals, and then some basic stuff on stranded cetaceans and the role of the veterinary team. Um, Moving maybe over to seals. Seals, I think, sometimes can be a little less friendly towards you when you're trying to free them from entrapments and things. What are the sort of things you are seeing? I mean, the vet chat and webinar vet has a strong focus towards sustainability and towards conservation. It's something that we're very passionate about as a team. Um, Presumably with seal pups and probably even with cetaceans, you're seeing evidence of sort of plastic pollution causing problems in these animals as well. What are
Yeah.
the sort of things that you've seen, and what are the common things you see in
Mm.
that sort of area?
Mm. So a absolutely massive global issue, and also a really important issue in the UK, and really, really important in Cornwall as well, is bycatch and entanglement of marine mammals. So bycatch being when an animal becomes entangled in a live fishing net, and then entanglement being when they are entangled in lost or discarded fishing gear. Very sadly, many of the individuals that are by-caught in those live nets will actually drown in the net. But the animals that become entangled in that lost fishing gear, that can cause them a whole host of really, really serious issues, wounds, pain and distress. Generally, it affects how they function, so they can't hunt as well, they become malnourished, they become sick. So it's a massive problem, and it is responsible for killing hundreds of thousands of marine mammals around the world each year. And sadly, it is something that I have a lot of hands-on experience with from my work here in Cornwall, and speaking to people all around the UK and other parts of the world as well. So particularly where I am in Cornwall, as an example, we have a big issue with fishing gear. So a lot of the work that we do in terms of kind of our collaboration with other organisations is around how to approach that topic with, with the fishing community in a positive way, and sort of working towards finding ways to prevent these horrible things from happening. So yes, for us, bycatch and entanglement, I would say, is our main issue.
What are the sort of solutions when you're speaking to the fishing industry? What do you see as the sort of top three things that fishing industry could do that would really massively reduce this problem?
Yeah, so there are some, we can look at some solutions potentially, like using acoustic deterrents. So these are kind of devices that are attached onto fishing nets that emit a sort of high frequency sound that is meant to deter marine mammals from approaching the net. And this works to a degree. The animals, and obviously with these animals being particularly intelligent as well, they will get sort of used to this sound over time, and come to realize that it's not going to cause them any harm. So things like that are, of some use, but maybe not of long-term use. For me, I think it's really, really important that we try and provide some educational materials for the fishing community, just to try and help them in terms of understanding the ecosystem that they're working with.
The nets, the plastic nets, are so resilient. They will last
Yeah.
for centuries in the ocean. So, are there some sort of more eco-friendly alternative fishing nets that will eventually degrade?
Um, I think there is research being done in this area, but I'm not aware of anything that's come up
No.
at the moment yet. I mean, the issue is just the fact that we are using these absolutely enormous nets that are just really indiscriminate, and we catch pretty much
Yeah.
everything rather than just the species that we want. The
Yeah.
trawler nets disturbing the seabed as well. That's again a massive
It's the
problem.
dredging, isn't it, that
Yeah,
causes all sorts of
all this sort of
problems.
stuff. It's huge. The impact that we have on the marine ecosystems are just massive, and we really need to try and better understand that
Yeah.
ecosystem and what we're doing to it, and the fact that it's going to cause us problems in the long term as
Yeah.
well as everything else.
The one that I was going to ask about is line caught tuna, because that's a big thing, isn't it, with the supermarkets, and what's the most
Mm.
eco-friendly or dolphin-friendly tuna? Is that something that's a possibility? And I suppose, because I think the dolphin really love tuna, don't they? I don't know if there's much tuna off the coast of Cornwall and Devon. I think that's probably more a problem in another part of the world, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. I can't say I know huge amounts about tuna. I know that at the moment we have fishermen who would like seals to be culled because they see them as eating all the fish, basically. And I know there have been calls recently to start culling tuna, funnily enough, because they are also eating other species of fish that we want
Oh, right.
to catch. So yeah, it kind of moves down the food chain.
It's not just our ocean, though, is it? This is the thing. We kind of should be sharing it with others, so they've got a right to catch a few
Yeah, of
fish as
course.
well.
And it's about doing everything sustainably and just trying to get people, I guess, to understand the impact that they're having, and that if they change their practices, it will benefit them in the long run, as well as everything else
Mm.
in the ecosystem too. So looking at these, marine protected areas, really, really important. Gives the ecosystem a chance to, replenish itself,
Yeah.
and then obviously we can benefit from that, and so can everything else.
Yeah, it was really interesting at COP15, which was in Montreal just before Christmas. The whole idea of 30 by 30, which is also a land commitment, but also a sea commitment, that by
Mm.
2030, 30% of our seas are protected from fishing. Because I think there's been a lot of studies done that show that if you keep a certain percentage of the sea free from fishing, that acts as nurseries and allows it to be more sustainably fished. And I think it was post COP15 that the High Seas Treaty was passed, which was again trying to pass into law this commitment by many countries, to the 30 by 30 commitment, which is obviously very heartening to see if it's policed and abided by.
Mm. Yeah, I sincerely hope that they manage to reach or even succeed those targets. Um, I'm a little bit hesitant to believe that they will achieve it, but I really, really hope they do. And like you say, there's just this real issue around policing and regulation, which is going to be a really massive barrier to overcome. But if it's successful, this will be hugely beneficial to
Mm.
everybody, and not just ourselves. So yeah, I'll absolutely keep my fingers crossed. And if there's anything that I can do in my work to support that, then I will do.
Well, I think you're doing brilliant work. And, I tell the story about the boy who saw the thousands of starfish stranded when the sea went out. And he was throwing starfish back one at a time. And a man came up to him and said, what are you doing? And he said, well, I'm throwing these starfish back in the sea. And he said, well, there's so many. What difference are you going to make? And as he picked up another one, threw it into the sea, he said it made a difference to that one. So I think with the work that you're doing, those 7 dolphin that were stranded, 8 dolphin, 7 of whom survived, that is a massive contribution. And, it adds up if everybody's doing work of this sort. I think it makes a huge difference. So, thank you so much for obviously doing that. Um, just maybe talking a little bit about the British Divers Marine Life Rescue. This is obviously a charity that you're now working with. And in fact, I think you're now pretty much full time with them, or you're
Yes,
not doing any small animal medicine work anymore, are you?
that's correct. Yeah,
And is that a charity?
yeah. So British Divers Marine Life Rescue is a national charity. So we respond to marine life, but mostly marine mammals in distress all around the UK coastline, and we do that via a really big network of specially trained volunteers, our marine mammal medics. And yeah, the charity's been going since 1988 and has helped many, many, many thousands of animals over the years.
Fantastic. And presumably, most of the sort of strandings and when you're trying to rescue the mammals, you're not having to actually dive because they are, on the shore. But hopefully, do you get a bit of fun and go out diving as well and see them in their natural environment?
Well, unfortunately, the divers part of our name is more of a historical reference now. So the charity was actually started by a group of divers who were trying to help out with a phocine distemper virus outbreak back in 1988 that was killing many thousands of seals. So we don't really do any diving these days, but I am a recreational diver, though I get out pretty rarely these days due to work commitments.
Yeah. Well, you're in the sea quite a lot, but only up to your belly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I try and yeah, we're mostly just in the shallows, thankfully. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, but it's
Fantastic.
good. It's good fun.
What is the probably the most common of the animals that you're seeing around the United Kingdom coast that you're apart? The seals, obviously, but amongst the cetaceans as well.
Yeah, so the two most common species that we deal with in terms of strandings are harbour porpoises and common dolphins by far.
Yeah. And then presumably with the seals, there's grey seals, and
Yeah, grey
would they be
seals.
the majority?
So yeah, in the UK, we have grey seals and we have common or harbour seals. But funnily enough, grey seals are actually quite rare globally. But we have quite a lot of them in the UK. They are more
Yeah.
abundant than the common seal, which is kind of confusing. But the common seal is more abundant globally.
Yeah.
Yeah, if that makes sense.
No, I thought I was going to say the common seal was the second one, and then I just was not confident enough in my sealology to make a fool of myself in
Oh
front of
no!
an eminent
If in doubt, the common
sealologist.
something's a good shout.
Natalie, it's fascinating work that you're doing. Thank you so much for everything that you are doing for these very special creatures. I think seals and cetaceans. I think they hold a special place in most people's hearts. And I do hope that the work that's being done on a more global level makes your work easier rather than more difficult. Because I think with the strandings, that there is a sort of belief that some of the poisonings and things that we're seeing in when we're PMing the cetaceans, there's a lot of plastics that we're finding there, and also various chemicals that are coming into the sea as well, and obviously causing illness in these animals as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, we're still seeing the really long-lasting effects of things like the PCBs that were being used,
Yeah,
many years ago and have been banned. But we're still, routinely, some studies will take blubber samples and find outrageous levels of these toxins still
yeah,
in these animals, which then gets passed down to the next generation when the mums are feeding their calves or their pups. So, yeah, really devastating.
yeah. But Natalie, again, thank you for the work that you're doing, for being that beacon of hope. Hope is something that I talk a lot about. We have to believe that if we do this sort of work, that there is a good outcome at the end. And that was a lovely story about the eight dolphins that were stranded, and that must have made you go to bed that night feeling pretty pleased with all the work that you've been able to do.
I think we were all absolutely exhausted.
You
But
slept well.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. So no, it was a very good outcome. Yeah,
Fantastic. Natalie, thanks again. Thanks for agreeing to talk to me. Also for the fantastic webinars that you've done for Webinar Vet,
no
and
problem.
for the fabulous work that you're doing protecting these species.
Oh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Natalie. Thanks, everyone, for listening. This was Anthony Chadwick, the Webinar Vet, and another episode of VETchat. Take care. Bye-bye.